Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Sunday. Pammy just pointed out a comment that I couldn't quite see from here. What was the comment?
Graham Bell was saying that his wife is a quilter and so she's interested in this cabinet. So I think, okay. Graham, I think you've got a bit of a challenge on your hands now,
I think
Graham.
so too, yes. So welcome to everybody. Normally I get on the chat before all those people who are waiting for the show to start and do my little greeting and things like that. I haven't been doing that this morning because I've been busy fiddling around with numbers. And as everybody knows, maths to quite a lot of people is a difficult task, oneself included. So I've had to sort of fiddle around trying to work out some numbers because this project, it actually has quite a lot in it that I didn't realise until after we got started. Thanks, Aussie. Anyway, this is where I'm up to at this stage. What I've tried to do is I've tried not to do too much outside of the camera. Basically because every time I do something, people go back and say, well, how did you get that? How did you do that? What, you know, I can't get that result. Tell me how to do it. Those sorts of things. So I thought this time what I'll try to do is I'll try to do everything on camera, including all the fiddly little bits and pieces to get a result. And that's what I've been doing at the moment. As you can see on my desk, I have bits of little sticky paper of a square, some pencils and bits of this and bits of that. I've got a whiteboard sitting here ready for use. There's all sorts of things going to happen. In essence, what we're doing at the moment is I'm going to put in two supports here for the drawers. These ones here, that one there and that one there. So that's what I'm going to try and do. But I have to go through a little maths equation to get everything to fit the way we want it to do. As you can see, the top drawers, there's 5 of them and they're small. The next one there's 4 and they're a little bit bigger, and then the biggest one's on the bottom. Now, I've looked at a few Apothecary cases online. I've looked at various shops have them, those sorts of things, and the majority of the ones that I've seen generally have the drawers all the same size and they're evenly laid out. There are quite a few that I have seen where we've got variations in the types of drawers. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to set the drawers for a purpose. Now, initially this is going in our office and Pam's going to use it for all the things that you use in an office space, things like tape and pencils and various other little bits of stock and stuff like that. But once the business disappears and we keep it as a sewing chest, I suppose, she'll want to keep different things in the drawers. And we've got small stuff, needles and pins and all sorts of stuff like that. And it'll be bigger things for her quilting. So it's quite a good idea. And to make them a little bit different, so you've got variations. Now, that entailed quite a bit of numbering and quite a bit of maths. I've got 5 partitions to put in here. I've got 3 there. I've got 2 there, and then those 2 there, and everything has to fit. And we can't glue the cabinet together that we built last week until such time as all of that stuff's done. So I have to sit down and work out mathematically what to do. Now, the first thing I did was I worked out that the material that I'm going to put in the partitioning is all 12mm thick. Okay, so we're going to have partitions set in the box. And I had to find a router bit that actually fitted the material. Keeping in mind that Huon Pine is quite rare, and you can see I've glued up a whole lot of cracks in these pieces, and I want to save as much of it as possible. And all I've done is I've put some glue in there, hardened it off, and then sanded it down to the right size. So actually that's quite full. I may not use this end because I've only got small partitions to cut out of the piece of timber. It's offcuts from when I cut the cabinet and the shelving. So these are the two shelves that are going to fit into here, one in there and one in there. Now somebody said to me, why do you need all of that timber in there? Well, I want to use the timber so that it's not wasted on things. I could make boxes out of it, of course, but I want to make a whole piece out of it because it's a nice wide board, and you might as well use it up to make something that's going to become an heirloom. So that's what will end up happening with this particular piece. It will become an heirloom of ours and made from beautiful Huon Pine. So let's not waste it. Let's just use as much of it as possible, even if I have to glue up some little cracks and things in the boards. So that was my thinking. Okay, so I've got lots of those bits and pieces left over. Now, while you were sleeping, I'm pointing at the wrong camera. While you were sleeping, I assembled this. It's not glued together, of course, it's just assembled. And I've cut a rebate around the back edge of the cabinet to fit my panel. This is my panel. Now, I've had to cut a rebate into that as well because I didn't want to lose the thickness of the timber. The timber's 9mm thick, my rebate's only 5mm deep. So I've had to fit it. Now, as I was saying before about the cracks and things, this has got a couple of cracks in it. They're small ones, right? They're all glued up, they're not going to go anywhere. But they don't show through on the outside. So, being a little clever about it, you can actually save your timber and still have, even though it's got a crack in it, you can still have a nice piece of timber that is going to work for you. So, that's going to fit into there. And it fits nice and neat. I'm not going to try and sort of fit it now because there's a bit of jiggery pokery to sort of get it to fit in there properly. I had to use a jiggery pokery word.
Of course you did.
So that's going to fit in there quite nicely. So that's what the back of the cabinet will look like.
Is that the same as skullduggery?
No,
not really.
Skullduggery is stucco. It's a different word. So that's what it's going to look like on the inside of the box. And so now what I would need to do is cut the rebates for in here. But then I had to work out the sizing and all that sort of thing. So I originally, shift that out of the way. I originally drew where I wanted the partitions, right? Well, I've got two drawn in there. There's 120 for the bottom drawer. The top drawer is 100mm high, and the next one is what's left over, which is 74mm. Now, originally what I did is I sat down and I worked out some measurements and found my millimeters and things like that, and couldn't work out why things didn't fit together. What I didn't do was this sum. Now, this is how I worked it out, and this is what you need to do to get your sizing of your drawers. So, I'm just going to draw this on here. What we have is we have two partitions at 12mm, right? So when you add those two partitions up, you've got 24mm. So we have 24mm. We need to subtract that from the inside area of the box. And the inside of the box is a 318mm. Okay, so we need to subtract the 24mm. I don't know why I'm going through this because it doesn't need to be done here because everything's not even. Oh dear, let's make a silly mistakes. Anyway, that 24mm has to be taken into consideration when you're doing here. So I've got 120 millimeters for that one, 100 millimeters for that one, and what's left over was 74 after those 24 millimeters were taken away. That's what we ended up with. So I'm going to write all that down on my whiteboard.
That's better.
So draw heights. Top drawer, $74mm, middle drawer, is 100mm, and the bottom drawer is 120mm. Okay, so I've got that information right. The next thing we have to do is fit our two partitions. So having that there, we have already started our information. I'm going to add to that during the show. The partitioning has to fit into a rebate. The rebate's going to be 5mm deep. And the partition's going to fit in like that. Now we won't see that because this will be the front. And what you'll see at the front is just a flat surface like that, and that was going to fit like that. So what I have to do is I have to cut a little rebate out of here to fit this here, so when I cut my trench I've got to stop a little bit short. That measurement can be anything you like, it doesn't have to be a particular measurement. The router bits we're going to use, I've got two router bits at 12mm. Now these ones are Kobe tool router bits, and they've got some fancy numbers, so it might be an idea if you're going to copy this design and use these router bits. These are compression bits, which means that they cut in and out at the same time, and they give you a very, very clean cut. You saw on this piece of timber how clean the cuts are. The shoulders are beautifully clean, the bottom of the trench is clean, and so you get a nice clean surface to work with.
So Cole, just explain why you're cutting that little rebate at the front, that little, so that you create a step.
Now that little rebate at the front here, that's a good question. If I put a piece of timber in there and push it along, I have to cut a square corner there for it to sit in, and I don't want the shelf to actually sit back off the front edge, and I don't want to see the trench at the front. So if I cut a 5mm rebate in here and sit that in there, it will sit down flush, so we've got a front edge. Now the timber that I'm using, normally a lot of people, what they'll do is just cut a piece off like that to make a partition, but you have end grain. I don't want end grain showing on the end of the box. I want side grain, so that I've got side grain showing on all of the partitions, all of the edges of the box, and all the partitions.
But not lots of trenching.
But I don't want to see all of that trenching either. I don't want to see, I just want to see a nice clean surface like that.
Yeah, yeah, and it will look beautiful.
That's why I'm going to cut the rebate on. So now I have to work out, just shift all of this stuff. This is where I'm doing my maths. And sitting down with your pencil and paper sometimes is a really good thing. It gets your head around what you're actually trying to achieve. Now, the router bits, these are specialist router bits. I went looking for them here in Coffs Harbour, looking for some sort of compression bits, but there's nobody here in Coffs Harbour that actually sells this style of router bit. And when you look at the router bit, it is a fairly complicated looking router bit. It's it's going to cut up and down at the same time. So you can see this one here is an upcut, and this one here is a downcut. So you're basically compressing the timber in there, and it spits it out nicely, and it's got an end cut as well, so it's sharp on the top edge. So that's a 2-fluted one. This is a 4-fluted one, exactly the same thing, only it's got 4 flutes in, depending on what you're doing. Now if I was using hardwood, that's probably the one that I would use. You can see it's got 4 teeth on it. Don't necessarily need to use it, but it cuts up and it cuts down as well.
It's beautiful.
So you can pick those up from Carby Tool. This one's a 12mm with a 1/2-inch shank, so it works perfectly for the timber. Now if you can't get one that has a 1/2-inch shank or a 1/4-inch shank with the desired top on it, get the best you can and then set your material to that size rather than trying to get a router bit to fit your material. Do it the other way around. Get your router bit, cut your trenches, and then dress your material to fit in the trenches. That works a little bit easier than trying to find router bits to fit material that you've already got designed. So you've got to think about that sort of thing when you... I'll pull that apart in a sec. I just want to set this in here. Now the depth of my cut is 5mm. So I'm going to set my lark tool at 5mm. The 5mm is right there. And no skip, I still haven't fixed this router, just in case you're asking.
He and John are on board.
Good evening, John. I haven't seen you for a while. Okay. So I've set that at 5mm. I'm going to test it before I do because it's quite important that I get it right. And by testing it, I'm just going to run a piece of this material over it. These are a couple of offcuts, and as you can see, I've got dovetails, I've got rebates, I've got a little rebate there. These are things that I've done just with these offcuts, just to make sure that everything works right. So I'll use that as well. Now, one of the other things I've had to do is I've had to build a special fence, because my timber when you sit that on there and you've cut through, the edge of the timber goes across the edge of the table. Now most of my fences are like this, so I've got nothing to put a stop on to actually stop it. So I've had to extend this so that when I do set it up, I think I'm going to have to shift my control panel.
Or can you turn yourself? Can you move yourself?
No, so I've got to shift the panel.
Okay.
Okay, so I've had to make this so that I could set it up properly. Now to test it, just get my little piece of scrap here, and I'll just run a trench across there, and I'll turn this around so I can get the camera here.
Thank you.
So all I'm going to do is just run that across the trench, across the router bit. It's not important where it is at this moment, it's just important that I cut a trench and get my adjustment right. Okay, so let me get a pair of earmuffs. because I was fiddling around with the mathematics of the cabinet, I've got nothing prepared. So it's on the fly at the moment. Okay, so ears on everybody. As you can see, that's a very clean, nice, neat little trench that I've just cut there. I just got to get my depth, make sure it's actually not deep enough.
Really?
It's only gone to, if I set it, I've got it set at 4 mils, so I'm going to come up a little bit. Check this again. Looks pretty right this time. Let's try again. Gears on. And so that's spot on 5mm now. So I've got my height set. Just testing that, make sure it's exactly 5mm. Set on 5mm. So if you're interested in a lark tool, if you haven't got one, get on to derek.lark. His contacts are details are below. And you can get one of those. Great little tool for all this sort of stuff. And of course we have the push box for sale if you're interested in the push box. All right, now we have to get into the nitty gritty of it. So pull apart my box. Now I've only marked one side. And I measured down up my 120 from the inside edge to this mark here, took the 12 and so forth. So all I have to do is I have to make sure that I get those marks set up accurately on here and cut them. And I cut them both at the same time. Now we need to take into consideration that this board here sticks out the back here. So we have to make sure our measurement's correct when we do our cuts. So I'm going to take a measurement from there to here, a measurement from there to here, and they're the cuts that I will use to cut my boards. Now, one board I have to start from here and cut through, and the other board starts from here and cuts through that way. So I have to put a stop here and a stop here when I'm cutting the two boards. So let me pull this apart. As you can see, it can become very, very complicated. Good fit. It's actually, I'm not hitting it that hard. Now, as you can see, no marks on that one at all. This aside. Side. Incidentally, I've marked on the board the ones that go together, and you need to make sure that you do that. I've got a mark here and I've got a mark on that board there, just to make sure that those corners go together. Alright.
Moment of truth, Cole.
Here we go. Now, we only get one shot at this, so we have to do it right. So what I want to do is I want to push through this way, right? So this board, I can start at the back of the board and I can work through to the front. This board, to do the same one, the opposite side to that, which is going to be, you need to make sure you get it right. One goes through this way and the other one goes through from here to there. So you're starting here, working through, or starting there and working through. So you'll see as we go through. Try not to make an error here.
So you mark the ones where and the direction?
I will do that. It's just reminding me I've got to mark directions for the board. So what I want to do here is I want to mark down here. The distance from that point to the end of here is what I have to set my stop at. And on this one, the distance from there to there for the short one. Because they're in different positions, we've got to cut this, then adjust for that one. And this is going to be the process all the way through putting all of these partitionings in place. Get that out of the way. Oh, hang on. As Pammy said, you've got to know which direction you're going to be pushing things. Okay.
This is our most complex project to date, I think.
Yep. So this one's going to be pushed from here. Okay, so it goes in that direction. Okay, so I've got to push that one in that direction. When I'm doing the other side of this one has to go in this direction. Okay, so that starts there and I push through to that way. Now I've got to have the reverse of that on the other side. So this one will be in this direction. And this one will be in this direction. I'm going to set my distance. All I'm going to do is I'm going to set that out a bit to this side here. I hope that works. Make sure my router bit is set 90 degrees to my work. If I do it this way, at least the trenches will all line up with each other. Okay, so got that in place. So what I'm going to do now is I've got to push through and stop. Alright. So what I want to do is I want to stop, say 10 millimeters out from the inside of that. So my distance from my cut for the stop will be 10mm out. Actually, I might make it, yeah, I'll just make it 10mm. Okay, so that's 266mm. Okay, so if I turn this to 90 degrees, put my square on here, 266 from the square is where I've got to put the stop. Okay. Put a mark on here. I need to do it the other way. The square is up against the edge of the round bit because that's where it's going to stop. There's probably 100 different ways of doing this, and you're probably saying, geez, making a hard work of that. I probably am. Okay, so there's my two stops. And my stops. Actually, I don't need them both on at the same time. What I do need is I'm going to push that one that way. So I only need that stop on there. Okay, so that should come. Oh, guess what? I've got to build a stop out of it, because of the thickness of that. This might work.
I see what you're doing. You're accounting for the cut of the joint.
The cut of the joint, yes.
So let's just leave it there and we'll have a look. We'll have a look at that. See if I can get the camera in there. Just do it again.
So what's going to happen is that'll come along and stop on that. And I'm going to stand it up. It's going to be my 10mm square. And it's about 10mm stop, which is perfect. Okay, let's do it. So that should cut straight through to there, and I'll stop up there. Now I have to reverse, I have to put the other stop on when I'm cutting the other one. Okay, so ready to go, folks. Keep your fingers crossed. this is where it's very, very important. Oh, look at that. Beautiful.
Wow.
This is where it's very, very important to make sure it's right to the mark too. Look at that, 10 mil. Very, very important that you have a perfectly square piece of timber before you actually start doing your trenches. And I've cut, and when you look at it, you can just see on the edge of that, if Pammy come in with the camera, you can just see the pencil mark that I've cut through the middle of. So having the adjustment set right is pretty good. Alright, now, I've only got one cut for that. I've got to have the other cut on the other end. Even if it's off a tiny little bit for this exercise, it won't really matter, because the stop at the end is not going to be seen. You're going to cover it with a rebate. But it's always nice to do things properly. Okay. Here's my other bit. And so I have to cut in that direction. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to turn the router on, and I'm just going to drop that straight down on top of the bit and push it straight through. Okay, so ears on everybody, shift that out of the way. And when we sit those two pieces together, both of our trenches line up. So that looks pretty nice. All we have to do is to do it a second time. Which one's got the mark? This one. So my distance for this one now, these vertical measurements, as soon as you move that, these vertical measurements don't come into play. You've got to do it again. So I'm just hoping that I don't have to shift my system. So here we go again. So vertical across there. Now we're good. Lock that in place. Be able to access the switch. Distance is going, the positioning is going to change again, so let's just, it was 266 I think. Just want to make sure we've got that measurement right. Pencil. 65, 66. Okay. So as you can see, that's changed because we have a different distance. I don't want that mark. Two 65, 266. Don't want that mark. We want that one. Okay, time for a little drink. Okay, so this one has to go in that direction. Do this one first. Wood. Probably saying that looks so complicated, but actually when you get your head around it, it is not all that complicated.
But it is all to do with the maths, isn't it?
It's all to do with the maths. Once you get your math worked out, it's good. Okay, ears on everybody. Well, number 2. Again, same procedure, drop that on top of there and just cut through. Now you need to be careful that the router bit is sitting up there. You don't want your thumb stuck on the back edge of that. So put your hand up here out of the way and use your push block on the other side. Just check everything. As you can see, the router bit's right there where most people would put their fingers to push with. So, like I said before, it's a good idea to make sure that you haven't got your hand pushing from the back of the piece of timber. I always put my hand up on the side there, it's nowhere near the router bit, and I have my push block holding a piece of timber down. So that's the way you should be doing it. So now that I have those done, I'm just going to get a little bit of sandpaper and just wipe the edges of that. I have all my trenches actually lined up for when the board goes, when the job goes back together. Taking a little burr off there.
It's just occurred to me that we are taking a huge leap of faith because we're building something that you've never made before in precious timber, and
Yes.
it's complicated.
Yes.
So,
fear not, people. Carry on, regardless.
Yep.
As you can see now, you can see where my bring your camera over.
Yep.
You can see the trenches are actually lined up quite nicely. So that's what they're going to look like when they're together. You just need to make sure that the two back edges are where you start everything from. We want to stop short. Now what I have to do is I have to square up those little corners. I'm not going to square them up at the moment, I just want to make sure that everything fits nicely before we actually do that. It may not be necessary to actually square them up. So let's just remove some of this stuff. I'll put the box back together and then we can get a true measurement of the length of our the two panels. Again, making tools to actually do the tasks is something that you tend to get used to after a while. Okay. Okay, so that's my mark. And this one has the mark on it, I think. By making sure that things fit nicely, when you're pulling things apart and putting things back together again, it's not hard work. I reckon that must go this way. Okay, so we now have, put it up the right way, we now have the rebates for the two shelves. What I need to do is cut the two shelves to size. So what I've done with these is I've cut them to the width of the panelling from the inside of the rebate to the front edge of the box. Now that's too much because the back panel has a little 2mm rebate on it as well, so it's going to sit inside a little bit, so these are going to stick out the front, and that's fine because then I can plane the front edges down to match the box. But what I need to do is I need to make sure that they actually fit in here. Okay, so they're going to fit in there, not a problem. What I have to do is get the right size. Okay, so let me take that measurement. And the distance that I have from inside to inside, and I don't want pushing things apart, is 479mm. Okay, that's from trench to trench. 479, 479 is probably a tiny little bit too loose. I don't want them too loose, but having them loose means I can jiggle them around a little bit if I have to for the vertical partitioning in them. Alright. So let's cut them at I'll cut them at 480 and then try and fit them. And I'm going to cut them both at the same time. I've got a straight edge along here. Both pieces are square. This edge's got a bit of a damage on it, so I can take that off. And the same on this one here, on the bottom one. I think what will happen today is we'll only get these fitted. 480. So over to my drop saw. I hope you've enjoyed today. It's exactly one of those days where you only get one task done. I think you can appreciate now why we spend so much money on good quality furniture. The effort to take and the time it takes to actually build this good quality furniture is in a lot of cases enormous. Okay, so cut. Let's see what happens. It's a tiny bit long, but that's okay. I'll just dress it down. That fits in the bottom one. Okay, just going to dress one of them down to fit. Just want to take a millimetre on, half a millimetre off. Sandpaper. A little bit more. This is the thing with it, it does take time, and you do have to readjust and set things. Not everything goes perfectly the first time around. Again.
Oh, that must be close.
Okay, so that's going to fit beautifully. I'm not going to push it all the way through because we have to cut the rebate in it for the two fronts, but that will fit perfectly. I'll just refit this one. Yeah, take a little bit off the edge of this one. That's probably all we're going to get done today. I'll cut the rebate. Use the right side. That will fit in there perfectly as well. Let's push the thing apart a bit. I might have to dress it down a little bit more, just so that it doesn't push the cabinet apart, which is what it's doing. So I'm just going to take a little bit more off. They both need a little bit more dressing, so I'll do them both at the same time. They're both exactly the same size at the moment. I think I might have to put a cramp on the box. Because it's not glued together, it tends to push things apart. Here is I'm using the kerf of the saw as my gauge. It takes about a quarter of a millimetre off if you push up against the flat part of the blade and use the kerf as your measurement. It just trims tiny little bits off. So if you've got a saw that has a fair set on it, as you can see, that's going to fit just jim dandy. This way. Doesn't matter which one I put in where, they're both going to be the same. Right. So, what's going to happen now, just got a bit skew with. Almost in. Excuse me. Beautiful. That's going to be spot on. So we're going to see this will come all the way through to the front here, and then I can plane these flush once I've got the back in it. And what will have to happen now is we're going to have a partition going here and here, and we're going to have 3 in here, because we've got 4 drawers. We've got 3 drawers here, and then I've got to get 4 partitions in this here. So I can't actually do anything to these until such time as I've got them fitting properly, and I can't cut the rebates in these until I've got them fitting properly. So what I will do over the off camera is I will set up, have these fitted, cut the rebate so that they're sitting flush, and I'll plane the top off that, because that's a pretty boring process that you don't need to see. You can all do that. And I'll just cut these rebates in here so that these will come flush through, and I have to fit the back on it so that I can get the correct distance from the back to the front of these boards. So that's what's going to happen. I have to clamp the box together to do that so that it doesn't keep pushing it apart while I'm working on it. And then I'll mark out, and next week we will cut as many rebates as we can in these panels here. So I've got to cut rebates in there, I've got to cut rebates in there, there, and there. So as you can see, it's quite a long process. Now everything's going to be 12mm. All of partitioning is 12mm. I originally was going to do 10mm, but I decided it's just too difficult to start sort of fiddling around. Just try and keep some sort of uniformity through the whole process. And so everything's going to be 12mm, but all my vertical partitioning can be cut off here, so I can cut them off as per I need them. They're all exactly the same width as these pieces, so we have no problems there. So that's it for today, folks. I'm going to call it quits right now, and we'll be back next Sunday, and I'll have these fitted for you nicely. Now, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and ring the bell, and we'll let you know when we're on the air. So enjoy the show, folks, and I hope you enjoyed it today. It was pretty painful, pretty plain with a lot of the processes that we're doing, but it's where we go to get results. Okay, so we have to go through those processes. So have a good week, everybody, and I will see you all next Sunday.